issues. Alex, the floor is yours, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you so very much. And I can hear myself. Wait. Now it's better. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you so very much, Charles. And I really regret I couldn't make it to be there with you in person. But it's also great to be able to meet you via Zoom today. And I'm also glad that I will be speaking today about another subject than Poland, because there can be no better lecturer on the Central Eastern Europe than Michal, and he introduced the subject perfectly. But as Michal said, as you, Charles, mentioned, there are a lot of problems concerning not perhaps even Holocaust denial in Poland, but Holocaust distortion, and all issues concerning so-called historical truth that relates to Polish-Jewish relations. And I'm actively engaged in the legal dimension of these discussions. Also these that are taking place in the courtroom, where Polish scholars, in particular Holocaust scholars, historians, are sued for their academic work and for their academic assessment of facts of history, but also of the very phenomenon of anti-Semitism. So these are the issues that I'm dealing with, but also as a legal scholar, I deal a lot with the phenomenon that is there, unfortunately, to observe, and which can be described as actually an attempt to weaken the legal protection, international human rights law protection offered for the Jewish people, and the protection against anti-Semitism, which is of course very closely linked with the general attitude towards the Jews and Israelis and Israel as such. And in recent years, it became more and more clear that this process of weakening of this protection goes hand in hand with the process of demonization of Israel and the actions of the BDS movement. Is everything okay, Daphne? Yes? Okay, good. Okay, thank you, Michal. Okay, so let's start. Oh, I can wait. Yeah, okay, good. Yes, so the obvious thing, but very often it has been not perceived as such. I mean that that anti-Semitism is a form of human rights violation, and perhaps the most ancient and persistent one. It's being called the oldest hatred in the world. I think it's borrowed from Polyakov, also mentioned already by Michal today. But it should be perceived as such, and I always insist on analyzing, researching on, and treating anti-Semitism as a form of human rights violation. Because if we put human rights protection at the top of our priorities, which is very often the trend also among, so to say, far left, that is becoming, to put it in a very general way, more and more anti-Semitic. So if we treat human rights as the most important value, then we should be treating the fight against anti-Semitism, including legal fight against anti-Semitism, as a part of this priority, so to say. So it's also not that widely known that anti-Semitism and fight against anti-Semitism has given wings to the international human rights movement in the 20th century. And historically, however, this trend of protecting against anti-Semitism is just the invention of the 20th century, and is very closely linked with the progress and development of the whole movement of human rights. Because for ages, both these ages of faith and ages of reason, this is borrowed from Polyakov for sure. Anti-Semitism was actually embedded in law, and law was used not as a tool of protection, but a tool and instrument of inclusion, exclusion, isolation, religious and racial stigma, discrimination, and even physical extermination of Jews. So we should really put a lot of attention to the fact that this development of law and human rights law in particular is actually one of the greatest things that happened in the last century, and we should also use it in our fight against anti-Semitism. But yes, still in 19th, 20th century, there were no civil rights for Jews in Switzerland, no access to public service for Jews in the UK, pogroms, Central Eastern Europe, in Russia, terrible Russian pogroms, ghetto benches in Poland. So the rule saying that Jewish students were not admitted to the campuses of Polish universities, and even if they were admitted, they were forced to sit in the last benches, in the last rows, in the lecture halls. They were beaten up, etc., etc. And of course, we have this culmination, I would say, of law being used against the Jews, the Nuremberg laws of 1935, and all what happened after, I mean, during Second World War. We should remember that a lot of elements of Holocaust and Nazi policies were also prescribed in law. And all these discussions that there was not a single order written down as law to conduct Holocaust or final solution. This is just perhaps not that important element of the whole picture, which is built of legal provisions of laws that Nazis were introducing in order to make the whole Holocaust and the process of extermination of Jews of Europe looking as a legally justified process, actually. So after Second World War, as I said, when the anti-Semitism became the part of the development of human rights agenda, it has been stressed for many times by many important actors of the international human rights law movement, that we should actually perceive anti-Semitism as such, as one of the core elements that also build this basis of protecting human rights with the use of law and within international human rights protection systems. There are two main such systems. I mean, the universal one created by the United Nations, and the European one that is based with Council of Europe and is concentrating around the judgments and case law of the European Court of Human Rights. Some of such judgments, these judgments, I will mention briefly in a moment. But as it was said by Kofi Annan in a beautiful way, but of course we know what is going on in UN and how it changed over time, and that actually protecting against anti-Semitism was perhaps more a dream or a plan than the sad reality, where there are fora at UN where anti-Semitism is actually being spread publicly, openly. So perhaps these words of Kofi Annan have never been fulfilled, but the very idea behind United Nations is also directly linked to the Holocaust and to the promise of never again. so it's important to see this connection and to see these roots also in the discussions with these who claim that actually anti-Semitism should not be protected, should not be fighted on the equal footing, like, for example, Islamophobia, because Islamophobia is now more important problem to fight against. But we should always remember about this this heritage of the fight against anti-Semitism. And as I said, UN became, unfortunately, with time, a forum of spreading anti-Semitism. But it's important to stress that that this is more about this political part of the UN human rights protection system that was centered around infamous UN Human Rights Commission, and then replaced by Council, where things are, as some claim, even worse now. But this is the poster from, again, unfamous Durban conference of 2001. These leaflets were distributed widely, and the whole Durban conference, the conference against racism, the biggest ever, most important ever gathering of various actors engaged in the fight against racism and racial discrimination under the auspices of UN. It changed to the large extent into the arena of spreading anti-Semitism. So this is also happening in the UN, the same as I mentioned, the UN Human Rights Council, but there is also General Assembly, and these are statistics from the resolutions condemning particular countries from 2005, sorry, until it was these data are from 2021. So you can see here clearly the disproportions of this condemnation. 112 resolutions of the General Assembly condemning Israel, in comparison to 5 concerning Iran, 8 concerning Syria, 12 concerning Russia, and 7 concerning United States. 0 China, Cuba, Venezuela, Zimbabwe, Turkey, Libya. So it's more than obvious how unfair the system is, how biased and politicized even these legal instruments, because General Assembly resolutions are legal instruments. Of course, we can discuss among lawyers mostly, perhaps, because this is the boring part, about the legal character of resolutions of different UN bodies. But for sure, there is a legal character in them, and consequences also attached to them. Even though most of them are of political nature, of course, but still, these are legal instruments, and they are being abused in order to spread hatred against Israel, which very easily turns into hatred against Jews and anti-Semitism. But there are good things too. And one of the greatest things that happened recently was the report by UN Special Rapporteur on freedom of religion or belief. I call this report historic. This is by Dr. Ahmed Shahid, where for the first time this very connection between different types of anti-Semitism and the acknowledgement of the fact that anti-Zionism and anti-Israeli hatred can be linked to anti-Semitism and can actually constitute a form of anti-Semitism. So for the first time, this has been acknowledged and written down clearly in this report. Of course, Dr. Shahid was highly criticized for this, but this is intellectually, I mean, his report is intellectually, legally, and morally honest, for sure. And this was very courageous of him to prepare it exactly within the environment that is hostile towards Israel and Israelis. And his report should be really read with care and quoted widely, because this is one of very rare examples of UN actually acknowledging this connection, that for I mean, all of us dealing with anti-Semitism, modern anti-Semitism, is quite clear that this anti-Israeli hatred turns into anti-Jewish hatred very easily. And perhaps, well, not perhaps, this is a, as I heard from other legal scholars, this is a controversial statement or thesis of mine, that I treat BDS movement as a systemic violation of human rights and human rights law in particular. And in my articles, in my writings, reports, and expert work, also I'm trying to prove this thesis. And of course, it's not to claim that all elements of BDS at the same time are anti-Semitic and are violating human rights, but I see this connection because I see the consequences, the results of BDS that touch actually real persons, individuals, so human beings that have human rights, of course. So among such consequences, there is a feeling of discrimination, persecution, exclusion, intimidation, and the rights of people who are targeted by BDS actions. They experience this harm to personal dignity, safety, often their freedom of expression, assembly, and association, as they are being stopped, limited, protested by the BDS activists. So for me, this links with human rights violations caused by the BDS are clear. And this is all being presented and shown as a cynical, to the large extent, claim of protecting Palestinians' human rights. Of course, I do not claim that all people involved in BDS have this cynical motivation. I believe that many of them believe that they are really doing something for the Palestinian cause. And to be clear, I think that the rights of Palestinians are being violated, sometimes in a very serious way. And Israeli obligations towards Palestinians are also clearly established within international law. So this is not to say that human rights of Palestinians are not being violated. Absolutely not. But I'm talking here about BDS and their impact on human rights of the Jewish people. But for sure, this is one of the most complicated and controversial topics among other issues concerning human rights when we talk about fighting anti-Semitism and fighting anti-Zionist attitudes. The European Court of Human Rights that I already mentioned. So this highest international judicial body in Europe among the member states of the Council of Europe. The European Court of Human Rights has already twice dealt with BDS in this aspect of human rights violations. A particular shift took place in the perception of the court of this problem, and it in 2009 actually. In both these cases concerned France.
Alex, sorry to interrupt you. Can you finish in about 3 to 5 minutes, please? We'll get Q&A.
No. Okay, so I will just
no coffee break. We'll continue.
No, of course I will. So this is just to, yeah. So this is just to show you that in 2009, the European Court of Human Rights actually said that boycotting Israel is not in accordance with human rights, and that the rights of the person who was punished for the boycott were not violated. So the French government, the French courts were in full position to actually go against this mayor of a small municipality in France who announced the boycott action, while in Baldassi, so 11 years later in 2020, the court actually said that these who were initiating BDS campaign and were punished on the national level, so that their rights have been violated by the fact that French courts went against them. So here we see that the court started to perceive BDS as a rightful way of expressing their political opinions. So this is also important in our thinking about how a human rights law, international human rights law, reacts towards BDS. But it's important to also to stress that generally European Court of Human Rights actually and its case law is one of the most important, powerful tools of fighting anti-Semitism, and it has stressed, confirmed on many occasions in tens of judgments that anti-Semitism stays beyond the sphere of free speech. Because this is actually spreading hatred and not using your rightful freedom to speech or freedom to participate in public discourse. So that's important. Other positive developments in Europe, I think the most important one is the first one, the first ever EU strategy on combating anti-Semitism and fostering Jewish life. It was launched not even a year ago, and it's a very ambitious, comprehensive program, and it shows how important the fight against anti-Semitism is for the EU. And Michal is a member of ECRI. There is a new general recommendation on anti-Semitism, also extremely important for the general fight against anti-Semitism with the tools of law. Okay, so I will skip this part of searching for answers, perhaps searching for solutions. What can we do as lawyers and people who want to use law in the fight against anti-Semitism? I think that it's important to strengthen and talk about this European legal perspective, because it's very anti-Semitic. Then promoting true story of human rights protection origins and goals, and stressing the Holocaust aspect of it. So Holocaust as one of the leading elements that actually help to develop and to create the very system of human rights protection, for sure in this general UN perspective. Finding new allies, I think it's important for all aspects of fighting anti-Semitism and all dimensions of our common fight, and investing in research on anti-Semitism, methodologies, etc., etc. And also engaging in litigation on national and international levels. So to put it differently, we need to go to courts in order to fight for our rights and against anti-Semites. Okay, so I will stop here. Thank you very much.
You can hear us, Alex?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you
okay.
very much, Alex. Thank you. So we have 40 minutes for Q&A. We have about 15 minutes. And I would like to ask
Charles, sorry, isn't this 6 minutes or 7? No, I thought we finish at noon.
Yeah, no, I'm being a little facetious.
Okay,
We're supposed
okay.
to stop in about 10, 15 minutes.
No, because I have 7 minutes before before I actually go to court. So
Okay, so we'll ask the first question to you. When you were speaking about human rights violations of Israelis of Israel against Palestinians, what were you referring to? Just for a point of clarification.
sorry, I didn't hear you. When I was talking about the human rights violations of
the Israelis against Palestinians, what were you referring to?
Oh, I think that there are many instances of such violations, and I would need now to go into detail of perhaps particular events that took place. But there are issues. We cannot deny this. And according to, for example, I don't know, international human rights law concerning freedom of movement, right to education, etc., there are violations of human rights of Palestinians, and I'm not even talking about these most, well-known and most significant violations that take place on the level of the international criminal law. But I'm talking about human rights perspective. So for sure, we cannot claim that there are any, and that there is no responsibility of Israel towards Palestinians.
All right. So I think with the issue of freedom of movement, I find that fascinating. And of course,
I have also in my research work, academic work, I have also seen, manifestations of online extreme hatred by the Jewish people against Palestinian people. Of course, nothing to be compared to anti-Semitism online, because here I think I have seen everything what's worst in the world. But there are such cases. So
I have a question for you, if I may. So I have a colleague, his name is Ed Kaplan from Yale University School of Management. And I remember when all the controversy regarding sort of freedom of movement, when the Israelis built the barrier, or the apartheid wall, as some refer to it. In his work, he found that over 98%, but I think it was 98.7% of all shaheeds, those are glorious people who are bringing martyrdom to the Palestinian people, suicide bombers, over 98.7% of the bombers were stopped by the barrier. But of course, the human rights community, and you allude to the issue, it interfered with the freedom of movement of Palestinians. So the question would be, is a sovereign state, what is the responsibility of a state to its citizens when genocidal anti-Semites who use the ideology of European anti-Semitism, and we all know that in Poland and in Central Europe, that did not go very well for the Jewish people. And when those reactionary social movements have used European notions of anti-Semitism, the protocols of the elders of Zion, fusing European notions, Nazi notions of Jews and Israel and Zionism, and engage in genocidal incitement and actually try to carry that out indeed with waves of suicide bombing. How does the International Court of Human Rights legal scholars like yourself make that balance? Do the Jews in this context with a state thankfully have the capacity for the first time to actually defend themselves, unlike the situation in Poland and in Central Europe where Jews were exterminated and the lucky ones escaped? What is the responsibility of Israel to curtail the movement of Palestinians in that case?
Charles, you're touching upon the most difficult issue ever when it comes to law, and the most difficult question for lawyers, how to balance these rights. But the fact that
it was quite an easy decision, actually.
No. The fact that something is helping to prevent terrorists doesn't mean that international human rights law stops to to be relevant in the discussion. It's like the question with torturers. If we can prove that they are useful when we can gain information and to stop the attack, are we free to torture people? No, we are not. So it's all about balancing, and of course courts deal with this differently. But what I claim and what I stress is that we need to we need to stick to law and legal interpretations, and this is for me the most important one, and this is very difficult because on this very moral level, I agree with you totally, but still where there are violations of human rights, we have to deal with them, and these who are responsible for them need to be taken into responsibility, right?
Thank you, Alex.
I know you are not happy with this answer, but
Alex, I'm always happy with you. Thank you.
No, but
I would love to talk more, but I want to
Sure.
integrate some people.
Hey, Professor, can you hear me? Or should I shout?
Let me cut
Yo,
to-
please come. Yeah.
All right.
Alex, somebody's coming to the computer.
Oh.
One second, sorry.
Who else would like to ask Alex the first?
Shalom, Professor.
Be very concise.
Sorry, yeah, my question's actually to you, but I just wanted to thank you. Michal,
No.
No, just to Alex.
Has to go to court,
Alex has
so
to
why don't
leave.
we ask Alex a question?
oh, so,
Do you have a question for Alex?
I do.
okay, so I'll go.
You'll go.
I'll go. Sorry.
Thank you. Eric.
I don't know why I cannot see. It should be this way that I cannot see you because I'm. But doesn't matter.
What
Okay,
about
a
the-
question.
Can you hear us? You can hear us?
Can you
us?
hear?
I can hear you. Yes. Okay.
Okay, well, my question is really quick and simple. I wanted to know more about the European Court and the BDS campaign.
Mhm.
And could you send us something, a reference to that or something we could read on that? Because that sounds really interesting and I want to know more about that, something that you could send and Daphne can share with us.
I will definitely, and perhaps
you.
some of my writings on the subject. I'm just publishing in 2 months an article which will exclude me from the legal community of scholars because it's about anti-Semitic motifs in ritual slaughter bans and BDS movement. So, so it will, and I try to prove there that there is this link at the legal community doesn't recognize this link enough. So both of these issues are tackled in this article. So I will send it, and of course I'm also ready and happy, to answer all questions you may send to me or to help with any other legal issues concerning our subject. I'm really sorry I have to go. It was a
So,
pleasure as
The last
always.
question.
Alex, thank
Okay.
you very much. We'll speak soon. Stay
Okay.
well.
Ciao. Bye.
Oh, what a shame.
Okay, we have 30 more minutes. 5 more minutes of Q&A. Alex, Michal, I want to ask you a quick question, and then Harry, and then you want to ask a question.
No, go ahead. No.
Very quickly.
Lady.
Why raise the issue of Gunther Grass? Who
No. Yeah, I don't want to look. I'm not the person who would promote the whole council culture here. That just because Günter Grass mentioned something problematic, I use him for a very concrete purpose. He depicted the atmosphere of Danzig in the same way as many reflexive people and many intellectuals feel, what they feel about the region now. I remember when fascists entered Slovak parliament 6 years ago, and I remembered memories of several people, what they were writing, what they were thinking about when Hitler came to power, and they were many of them were saying, we literally smell blood on streets. you know, and that's what we feel, you know, that something is boiling. Yeah, and that's why, you know, that's why I mentioned Günter Grass, just because he depicted that atmosphere very well.
Yeah.
And what you said about him, I'm perfectly aware of it. Yes, and you know, and people, you know, and look, people are not black and white, you know, that's the problem, you know.
Only the
Is
very.
it so?
Yeah.
Harry.
So, Michal, thank you so much. It's really interesting. Two questions really quickly. One, you mentioned the situation in Central Europe in terms of data, and whilst I entirely agree with you, and it is concerning, I just wondered, do you think this will disintegrate or translate into any kind of attacks against Jewish property in synagogues like what we're seeing in suburbs of Paris, like in Sarcelles, or in Malmo, Sweden?